up YouTube? Fred here. Welcome to Fred's Full Throttle. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than some of the other stuff I've done. As my channel started to grow and I'm getting a little bit more comments on each of my videos, I've started to have some conversations, and one of the things people have started to ask is, how did you get the Corvette? You know, did you save for it? Did you have a bunch of money or something? And so for today's video, I figured I'd walk through how I got the car, how I saved for it, and hopefully that can be a little bit more transparent around buying a car like this. And it's something that I never thought I'd be able to afford or get, and it turns out there's a way to do it. So let's get right into it. So the first piece of this is figuring out how much car can you afford, and like, what are you willing to spend? And so for me, it came down to a couple of things. The biggest thing was that I needed to know that my monthly payment after I bought the car wasn't gonna, wipe out my bank account, that I was gonna be able to afford it. And so the way that I did that is I had a 2007 Toyota Tacoma. I bought it new back in 2007, and I realized that I was comfortable paying the car payment that I had for it. I had a loan for a little over $20,000, and the amount of money that I paid each month was about $420, give or take, a couple dollars here and there. And so my thought was, whatever car I buy, I want my monthly payment to be no more than that. So since I was comfortable paying for the Tacoma, and it's $420 a month, that meant that I could take a loan for anywhere between $20,000 to $23,000 and slide just under that $420 amount. At 3%, a $23,000 loan is about $413 a month, give or take, whatever the loan rates are. And so I was like, okay, that's my number. If I can get a car where my payment is less than that, then I can afford the car. It won't change anything in my life. One key to that is I knew that I was going to keep the Tacoma for a long time. So fast forward a little bit, it's 2021 now. I've owned the truck for 14 years. It's got just shy of 200,000 miles on it, and it's been pretty darn reliable. So I knew that my daily driver at a minimum was going to be covered, and that way that freed up some other money if I wanted to make a car payment towards something else. The next piece is figuring out what car did I want. And I'm not going to get into this. Everybody's a little bit different how they do it. But I was down to a couple different cars. I was looking at the BMW M2. I was looking at the Cayman S. And I was looking at the C7 Grand Sport Corvette. And for a variety of reasons, I ended up with the Corvette being kind of the top of my list. So I won't get into that for this video. But a few people have asked, why did you pick the C7 Grand Sport over the Z06? And it really, the honest answer is money. Take any C7 Grand Sport. If you want that as a Z06, same options, same colors, because you could do that. You could get everything the same. Add $15,000 onto it. So a car that was in the 70s instantly is like up in the 90s, high 80s up to the 90s. Plus, I rented a Grand Sport before I decided to buy one. And I rented it for 4 hours. I got 150 miles of driving on it. It was actually an automatic instead of the manual, but that was what sold me. I fell in love with the car, and that was what, this is the car I want. And once I knew what car I wanted, then I was able to start figuring out, how can I afford this? So the next question on this is figuring out, how do I get there? And it seems like, there's this super expensive car I want to buy. How can I afford that? But it's actually fairly easy to break down into pieces, and that was how I tackled the problem. Everybody probably approaches it a little differently. The first piece is that I had paid off my truck. I had paid off my daily driver. It was costing me very little to own and operate, and my plan was, and still is, keep that thing as long as I can. Toyotas are reliable, just get all the service done, and I generally am not going to have many problems. Once the truck was paid off, I knew I wanted to buy something fun. I wanted to buy a sports car. So I took that $420 a month payment and I put it into savings. And I kept paying it, basically paying it to myself, but there were a couple pieces to this. First, I made a checking account where I was going to be putting this money. I had a separate checking account already, so I just sort of earmarked it. The website let me relabel it, so I said, car savings, kind of to remind me why it's there and why that money was going up. Every month, $420, $420, $420. So, $420 at a time doesn't seem like a lot, But that's $5,040 a year. So right off the bat, $5,000 every year towards whatever I'm saving for. I saved for 6 years in order to buy the Corvette. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I didn't have a lot of extra money. I didn't have the ability to just go out and buy the thing. And I didn't have enough savings that I could just go out and buy the car and not have it affect my finances. So I just started socking away money. And at the time, I didn't even know what I was going to buy. I didn't know which car. That choosing the car actually was one of the last pieces of this. I knew I wanted a sports car, but I didn't know. I thought I was going to get a WRX STI. Then I was like, oh, Focus RS. Then I was like, Ford Raptor. And then finally it was like, okay, let me start test driving some stuff that I can afford. And that was when I decided on the C7. So initially it was saving with the goal of buying a fun car, but not knowing what that was. So the next piece of this is that every paycheck that I got, I took $50 or $100, kind of depending on how my month was going. Take that $50 or $100 and pop that over into savings. Take that same account and just treat it like a bill. Treat it like I had some additional utility. $50. So that works out to $100 a month, which works out to $1,200 a year. So then you multiply that times the 6 years I was saving, and that works out to $7,200. So in that same 6 year span, I was doing this, and doing it at $50 a month works out to $7,200. I know there were some months I put a little bit more. Some months I just did the 50. But over that span of 6 years, I basically had the idea, okay, I'm going to end up with another $7,200. So just with those two things, that helped me get to about $37,440, $37,500, let's say. So I had $37,500 saved in the bank, cash, ready for this. And the good part was that this didn't affect any of our normal expenses. It didn't affect the ability of us to pay our mortgage. It didn't affect any other loans we have. This actually worked out to be a really easy way to save, and it didn't feel like I was losing anything. My quality of life didn't change. I was still able to pay all my bills. It was actually a pretty interesting way to do it. So part of the key of all of this, given that I knew that I never wanted to pay more than about $420 a month, is figuring out how much can I afford and what does the car cost. You sort of have to know that going into it, even if you have a ballpark number in mind. I did a little bit backwards. I was like, I'm just going to start saving and keep looking at interesting cars. And when I get to where I can afford an interesting car, maybe I'll buy it. What I would do if I could do it over again is, okay, this is the kind of car I want. This is the ballpark, within $5,000, here's what I need to have. So the Grand Sport I bought, the window sticker, the MSRP on it was $74,085. But I didn't pay that. So since I had been saving for a very long time, I was doing all my homework, and McMulkin Corvette, which is over in Nashua, a couple towns over from me, they're the second largest Corvette dealer in the country. And I was actually able to get 13% off MSRP. That works out to $64,454. So literally $10,000 off the sticker price, which makes that car a lot more attainable. So then, if you work out figuring out that $23,000 is kind of my target for my loan, it meant, okay, if I take $23,000 and I subtract it from that $64,454, that should give me roughly how much money I need to save. So if you do the math on that, it's roughly $40,000. So I had said earlier that the amount of money you can save just from, I took my car payment and I took about an extra $50 a paycheck. I was able to save up, just with those two things, around $37,500 towards this $40,000. Now this $40,000, this was going to be down payment, and then I was going to take a loan on the rest. So if you're following along and you take all the different numbers that I'm going through here, you're going to notice that the numbers don't add up perfectly. You'll notice that while a $23,000 loan, if it's $64,454 minus $40,000, that actually works out to $24,454. Well, wait a second, that's like a $1,500 difference on what you said you would do. So there are a couple other pieces to it, and I'm going to cover those now. So when you're buying a car like this, you're not going to clear out, or you shouldn't, you're not going to clear out your bank account. You're not going to take whatever your savings is and just wipe it to zero. You certainly need to have figured out your finances well enough that you have a bit of a safety net, you have money for some extra expenses. And that's what I did. So I wasn't going to wipe out my account. It meant that if I'm going to pay $40,000 towards this car, I'm not going to spend all of the money I have and just blank out the account to zero. I'm going to need quite a bit of additional money just to make sure that I don't, need a repair on the Tacoma, have some unforeseen expense, maybe buying a whole bunch of heating oil if it's winter, that kind of thing. So there were a couple extra expenses I needed to account for to begin with. I wanted a car cover, that was $100. I wanted to get Expel on the car, and that was like $3,000, $3,200 that was on top of the cost of the car. And then the last one that came for me is that in New Hampshire, we don't have sales tax. So the great part about buying an expensive car is that you don't actually have sales tax added onto it. You get a better deal. There are a number of other states that have that, but the state's going to get their money. They end up having excise tax. And so when I registered the car, it was, $1,600, $1,800 of additional money I had to pay when I first registered the car. And then the way that works, if you're not familiar, is every year when you're paying to register the car, that number goes down. The older the car gets, the less that excise is. And thankfully, after a couple years, it drops significantly. Instead of being in the $1,600 or $1,800 range, right now, I think last summer it was like $600, so it was $1,000 less. But you need to keep that in mind. So between those extra expenses and that difference between the $23,000 I'm willing to pay through a loan and the actual price I had to come up with of that $24,454 is I ended up having to pay another couple thousand, let's say $5,000 for all those other expenses up front. So instead of $40,000 is what the down payment was. I actually then wrote a personal check for that other amount, and I was able to just pay those things out of pocket. And I left my savings account with, $3,000, a couple thousand, so that if I had something else come up, that I'd be protected. So as much as you want to save for, if a car is X, I want to save for X, you actually need to save a little bit more because there's some of that other stuff. So the next piece is, now that I've bought the car and I actually have it in hand, what is the next piece? What are you paying each month when you own the car? And that actually breaks down pretty easily. So I mentioned that with my loan, I was doing about $420, let's say, a month. It was a little bit less than that due to the interest rates and stuff, but let's say $420 a month. You got to pay for insurance. In my mind, I was worried that the insurance was going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. You have to get full coverage because you have a loan. But it actually didn't work out that way. So I had several policies, and I was able to, through good driving, good credit, not having any accidents or any claims, and having a bunch of these other policies, it actually made owning the car not very expensive from an insurance standpoint. I don't know offhand what those numbers were at the time, but I looked at what my current policy is, and I'm paying about $56 a month for full coverage on the car. So it's not just the liability. This is, if a car gets damaged in some way, a tree branch falls on it, my insurance covers that. And I'm only paying $56 a month on it. So take that $420, add $56 to it, and I'm only paying, a little less than $480 a month to own this awesome car. A couple other things that might come into play is your first couple oil changes are generally covered when you buy a new car. So that was actually a nice surprise. I didn't pay for my first 3 oil changes, including the break-in service. So it meant that for the first 2 years, I had no maintenance expenses on the car whatsoever. And if there had been something wrong, warranty would have covered it. And then on top of that, you do have to buy premium gas. I didn't factor any of that into the calculations for this video. Factor that in separately. But that ended up meaning that me, who's just a kind of a normal guy, was able to afford pretty much my dream car through a little bit of perseverance and a lot of saving. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. If there's enough questions, I can do a follow-up video on this. Quick shout out to another YouTuber, Northwoods Overland, who provided me this awesome t-shirt and some stickers. He's another automotive YouTuber here in New England. His kind of focus is overlanding in his Toyota 4Runner and building like the ultimate overland rig. So go check out his channel. I'll include a link in the description. Thanks for watching. Until next time, Fred out.